A pious man is on bended knee, asking for forgiveness from the heavens above. He has just survived a battle where he saw horrific scenes that no one should ever see. His moral compass feels off. He is a knight who has taken the cross, a deeply religious Christian. Yet he is also a man with the blood of hundreds on his hands. He is a part of a new breed of Christians. He's been given full permission by the Pope to be a warrior of God, given the right to kill when needed, but still have access to eternal paradise in heaven. This goes against one of the main 10 commandments, "Thou shalt not kill." But in this dog-eat-dog world, what other choice does he have? It's kill or be killed. Such is the life he has chosen. Yet still, the knight prays in an attempt to gain forgiveness from above. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm the Knight of History, and in this episode number 4 of the Crusader story, we're going to take a look at the life of a Crusader knight. The individual that has taken up the cross is surely a person who is religious. More often than not, they see it as a calling to save the Holy Land. But a lot of them were actually criminals, seeking money and seeking glory. This, of course, is not the first part of this series. It's not the first part of the Crusader story. So if you haven't watched part number 1 to part number 3 yet, go watch those first. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's get into it. We have previously discussed the Islamic world in the First to the Third Crusade, but today we are going to discuss exactly what it was like for a Crusader knight. I've actually done an entire series on the Knights Templar who took part in the Crusades. So if you would like to go and watch that, please find it in the description down below. When Pope Urban II called for the Crusades, he gave the people who would take up the cross and join the Crusades a get out of hell free card by telling them that they would be rewarded with eternity in heaven because they are retaking the Holy Land for Christendom, which of course meant that this new powerful movement began in Christianity. But how was this largely illiterate European population enticed to join the Crusades and take up the cross? When Saladin had taken Jerusalem in 1187 after the Battle of Hattin, the Crusaders who were still there sent images back to Europe, back to their Christian brothers, of Muslim warriors allowing their horses to defecate on the Holy Sepulchre. Religious language and religious imagery were constantly used to recruit knights to come to the Holy Land for Crusades. Famous preachers such as that of the monk Bernard of Clairvaux traveled across Europe, whipping up crowds into a religious frenzy, getting them to come to the Crusades, telling them that the very earth trembles and is shaking because the King of Heaven has lost his land, the land where he once walked. People were utterly mesmerized by these speeches, joining together in their unified faith. But religion wasn't the only motivator for the Crusades. As these Crusader states grew, some knights saw the Crusades as an opportunity to gain fame. Stories such of great knights of Godfrey of Bouillon and Richard the Lionheart inspired other knights to seek for glory in the Holy Land. For the peasantry, the majority of the people, the Crusades offered them an opportunity to escape the grinding hell of poverty in Europe and the control of their feudal overlords, where they worked as serfs, almost a form of slavery. As we know, of course, wars are expensive, and going on crusade was like going to war. It was expensive. A knight had to pay for himself, his equipment, his food, his armor, not to mention his small entourage of foot soldiers and servants that would come with them. There are in fact historians who estimate that one crusade can cost a relatively poor knight up to 4 times their annual income, which means that a number of knights who went on the Crusades, went to the Holy Lands, actually came back to Europe much poorer than they left with. This is, of course, if they return at all. The survival rate for the Crusades wasn't particularly high, with 1 in 3 knights dying in either battles, starvation, or disease. The sparsity of the Holy Land was a challenge, and hunger became the constant companion for the Crusaders. They often, more often than not actually, would have to resort to eating horses, dogs, cats, and really, in extreme circumstances, each other. When or if a Crusader knight finally managed to get to the Holy Land, they faced disease such as dysentery, cholera, and malaria. On the other hand, they were no longer in Europe and the weather was harsh. The scorching heat of the desert was really impactful. The heat of the desert reached unbearable temperatures for the Crusader knights, and they had these really heavy suits of armor made of metal, which would burn in the sun and then in the winter would rust because of the rain and the snow. When they finally arrived in the Holy Land, life for the knights who settled in the Crusader states was actually rather good. They often adopted the lifestyles of Eastern Muslims, who they called Saracens, which is just an ancient Greek word for Arabs. The knights washed themselves regularly, which was different compared to Europe. They often would eat Middle Eastern food and wore turbans as well. They really ingratiated themselves in this Eastern Arabic lifestyle. Even the Arabic houses with courtyards, fountains, and glass windows were far more luxurious compared to the knights' rather large but drafty castles back in Europe. The knights ingratiated themselves in their new home in the Holy Land, so much so that the priests within the Holy Land actually recorded a large number of European settlers marrying local women, as well as adopting their local languages, by the way. The priest of King Baldwin I, the first king of Jerusalem, a person called Felcher of Shiraz, wrote, "Who are we? We were once Westerners who have been made Easterners. He who was a Roman or a Frank is now a Galilean or a Palestinian." There was this bewildering array of different races and religions who lived in the Holy Land: Armenians, Greeks, Arabs, Jews. European settlers did, however, rule over them all. European peasants who had come to the Holy Land had more legal rights in the Holy Land, in the East, compared to the West, and they had more legal rights compared to the Eastern population. There was, however, a bad side. The Christians and the Muslims did have some interactions, mainly through trade, but the majority of Muslims in the Holy Land were now forced to live as peasants. They say love has no language, even though any love affairs between Christians and Muslims were cruelly and violently punished in the Crusader states. According to a law which was made in 1120, women who were caught having a love affair between religions would have their noses cut off. Men, on the other hand, would be castrated. However, the majority of knights in the Holy Land were part of religious and dynastic orders. This is where they have developed their warrior monk lifestyle. These were orders that lived together, took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But they were warriors, they were fighters, and they were feared for their discipline and devotion. One of the best known of these orders is, of course, the Knights Templar, who were formed in 1120 to protect the Christian pilgrims coming to and from the Holy Land. They were given land on the Temple Mount of Jerusalem, hence their name, the Templars. And they were led by a Grand Master who was elected. They had long beards, had initiation ceremonies as they were invested as knights, and were not allowed to leave the battlefield while the Knights Templar banner still remained standing. They were fearsome fighters. Because of their great skills and great popularity, the Templars were given land all around the Holy Land and all around Europe, and they were made extraordinarily wealthy through their financial empire. They were a real international bank. They had become so large that by 1312, the Pope and the French king had them disband because they were perhaps too powerful. They were probably going to become a country of their own. I've made an entire series on them. Find it in the description down below. But the Knights Templar were certainly not the only order in the Holy Land. They were the elite Knights Hospitaller who were driven from the Holy Land, moved to Cyprus, then to Rhodes, and then to Malta, and ruled over Malta until 1798. There was, of course, the Order of Lazarus, helping leper colonies in the Holy Land. Today they continue as they've been unified with the Order of St. Maurice. It's actually now headed by a Grand Master as well, who is hereditarily the head of the Savoy royal family, the Italian royal family. And he constantly invests people as Knights of Honor, people who have done great charitable acts, etc., etc. As you can see, these orders moved away from the Holy Land. The Crusades ended, but how did they end? Find out in our final installment of the series next time. Thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. The more you know.